Okay, so next thing to ground are the two lugs on the volume pots. A lot of people like to wire these to the body of the pot itself. Personally, I don't like doing that, because what happens is you end up with a bunch of extra wires running all over the darn place. But you gotta make sure that you got a nice solid connection on this. That's the first thing, just like that. And why do I concern myself about extra wires? There is going to be so many wires running this thing. It's just crazy as it is. Ground wires to the back of these pots, there's a lot of them. So what we're doing and the design we're following, and this one's being stubborn, but there we go. Make sure we didn't drip down in it. Nope. So there's a nice, ooh, it's hot. Nice solid contact on that, nice solid on that. So it's nice and grounded. And that's all you do need. So when you're doing it this way, make sure you don't put too much pressure on the leg itself and break it off. That is a hazard of doing it this way. But then you don't end up with a bunch of wires, you know, extra 2 wires in the way of your wiring. And believe me, it gets confusing, I guarantee you. Now, the next bit of soldering we're going to do the back of these volumes and run their ground wires, but I will be using some flux to help get these things to adhere very good. So I will be moving them around, not only out of this template that they're on right now, but also on the body of the guitar, And I want to make sure that they're on there good, because I'll be squeezing them kind of together and pretty much pulling these together too, much closer between each other. And these, I probably have a piece of plastic or rubber between them, so I can squeeze them together and have them not touch, because we are that strapped for space on these things, and that's why I went with these instead of those other ones. There's just not enough room. So let's cut away. We'll come back and we're going to ground these to make the big U, what I call it. This to this, this to this, and this to this. Even though they're already grounded, they have to be grounded to each other, with the exception of the 2 volume pots never get grounded together. Alrighty, so I want just the plastic part really to adhere. I'm sorry, I don't want the plastic part to adhere to the metal or be touching the metal if I keep from it. I just want the leg of this ground wire to touch. I get to sit down. That flux should grab it. Just like that. I don't think it's on there too well. I'll have to test it here in a minute when I get a chance to cool off. I want to make sure that's on there good, and then I'll remove the extra flux after I finish grounding everything else to it. And yes, it's on there very well, thank you. Alright, now I'll do the next one. Next ground wire. I'm going to trim this some, it's a little too long. And I want to go under and then to the side of this, like that. And here's where the helping hands come in again. Alright, because I don't have 3 hands. This definitely gives me 3 hands. My problem I ever had with this thing is that sometimes it gets too tight and it's hard to maneuver. So I have to have these wires just so they're up against it, just like that. That's exactly what I want, if you can see that. See this? Plastic is not on it, so I'll hit that with some solder and capture it. Again, the trick is getting that helping hands off there without pulling this thing loose again. I want to go up the joint if I can, like that. And it's a little bit lumpy in the middle. I don't like that. I wish it had spread a little better. And sometimes I will not curl, I won't twist the wires up into a single. I'll have them, you know, splayed out, so that's more area to adhere to. But that's on there very good, thank you. And I need to trim this down a bit. It's a little too, no, maybe not. What I want to do is come in behind this one, like that, to help hold it in place. Okay, you see what I've done? I'm taking the yellow wire here. Where's my finger? Alright, jeez, okay. I think it's yellow wire here going over the top of this one ground, and I'll ground against the back of this, alright, where it belongs. Let's just check the drawing real quick to be sure. Yes, it does go to the body. Now on the drawing it shows grounding to the same ground spot that you did for the leg of this pot. I never recommend that, unless that's the only place you have to, the only place you can ground. It's better to find a new ground spot on this rather than try to go back over an old one, because, you know, simply because you'll get the other one loose and may have a hard time getting it back on there again. Alright, I don't use any flux on this because there's plenty of holes on this thing from the lettering to hold this in place if I can get the solder in the right spot. I think that's it. And always make sure to clean the tip of your, soldering iron off when you use it. Any old solder and stuff gets on there, it doesn't help it. And it becomes maybe a temperature issue. Now, if that pulls up, it won't it won't touch anything else but the body of the pot. So that's exactly what I want to see. Okay? Now this next one, the groundwork I have to do, I'm probably have to flip this board over so I can get to it and hold it in this position. There's nothing else I can go with, and that's going to be a little too tight for my likings, darn it. I may have made a mistake. I want to take this one off before I get any further with this. It's going to come off. I just can't let that happen. This wire is just not long enough. As you can see, it's on there very well too, darn it. I'm off there. But I will use that solder you see on there and the flux that's on there again. I've just got to make a longer, oh here it is, I used the wrong wire. Oh darn it, I know it. That was between the two pots wiring. I should have used this one, because this is the exact right length for what I'm doing. Doggone, I picked up the wrong one. Now, since I already have solder on here, I'm going to go ahead and tin this wire here, which means taking your solder, heating up this tip here of wire, and putting solder along the length of it. It'll hold against other soldered stuff, just like that. See how it's nice shiny? Well, it's got plenty of solder on it now. So those frays, those strands are all now connected, and they'll be easier to solder up on that spot there. Okay. I go back to it like that, and yeah, now there's plenty enough room to use. I used the wrong wire, darn it. Now the helping hands come in again. Oh boy, oh joy, don't I love to use these things. But if it weren't for these things, I'd just be out of luck. I guarantee you I'd be SOL. Alright, now I'm going into the same area of solder, and there's still flux on these things to add other ground wires to them later on. But I will also put a little more solder on there to capture this wire. And I want to heat up the old solder against that flux to grab it just like that. Now that's a little bit larger blob than I like, but I guarantee you it's going to go nowhere. Once it cools, see it's nice and shiny. Once it cools, I will not be able to pull that thing off there. Kind of like the other one. I try to get it off by heating it up and pulling it off. Well, you do a good job, use flux and have those things scored right, that wire is not going to go anywhere unless you really put the heat to it, or really yank the heck out of it. Sometimes that doesn't work. The plastic comes off from the surrounding, comes off the wire itself. Okay, I'm sorry you can't see this too well, guys, but I will be going against my druthers and wiring it up, soldering it up to another solder line, because just that didn't hold very well. So I'm going to use the solder to capture this other ground line, at the same time recapture this red one. It's also ground, and hopefully this will hold on there better, you know, because right now I don't like the way it looks. There's a blob there because of gravity, and there's an issue with that, and I'll tell you about it in a minute. Oh, there's still a blob. Doggone it, there's a tip too. I don't want that at all. No, gotta be touching. Gotta be on there. That did it here because it's not pulling off. Let's lift it up and look. I don't have this soldered with the darn on here. I've got to get this on here. Yep, that's why I thought the tip is on there, nothing else. On this yellow ground wire. And I want all of it on if I can, but gravity's fighting with me. Sorry guys, I just got to do this and get it done. Okay, so the entire leg of that ground wire is now touching, as well as the red is now securely on that pot, which I'm going to do some testing on it later on. I'll do some pulling on it, just make sure we don't have any issues with that, because that's kind of like not the way I would have had it if it had been, you know, perfect. But anytime you have a blob on these things, you get to be concerned about rubbing up against something on the back of it and knocking it off. You know, if it's a real tight squeeze, and this is a tight squeeze, so that's why blobs bother me. But putting on the side, same thing. And I can't go to the front, so I have to go to the back and try to keep these wires separate as best I can. But ground to the body is ground to the body, and that's not going anywhere, I guarantee you. I got plenty of solder on both those to hold those in place, even if I rub up against something. So, yeah, that's on there good. The next step is to ground these two these two tone pots to one another with this wire that I used, you know, incorrectly the first time around. And I think what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to go ahead and tin this. It's got a blob on it right now, so let's just thin that out. I'm going to tin the other side as well to make it a little bit easier to get this thing on here and have it hold. I don't want it fraying right now, and this will definitely stop it from fraying when you tin these tips. And tinning means just, you know, taking the solder and just running it on it. It's this little term. And this wire is already tinned. It's tinned copper. We've already tinned it, pre-tinned it. And the reason why I want this to be tinned is so I can put it in here and hold it in position. But I'm not really sure yet how I want to do this, you know. Okay, well, darn it, the camera off. But the worst, you know, case scenario, I did take the laces now. I tried to double ground this in one spot. Of course, all that happened was I pulled the one loose by heating it because it was under tension. So I just put it right back where I found it, and the ran this one with a lot of slack on it, as you see, you know, this one right here. So it can bend and move about without falling off. Yeah, there's extra solder back there I didn't want. Now we'll go back and put some more solder on this when I hold the board up, but anyway, it's on there. I guess when you're soldering in tight spaces, or parts that go into tight spaces, the main thing you don't want is have a tip exposed. All the ends of these things to be up against the body of the part, so it doesn't snag anything when you're putting it in and squeezing them together. And now I can always compress this. Because of the slack I've left, as well as the, you know, there's slack in these legs of these things too. I'm not soldered these down yet to the post because the other parts go in there, and I will dry fit the parts that go in multiple, you know, like an eyelet that contains multiple parts. I will dry fit those, especially for the pickups. I don't want to solder those outside the body of the guitar, but for testing purposes I will go ahead and get those wired into the circuit and then run tests. I got a few more wires to do here for the job, such as finish up the three-way ground. I believe, yes, it's all connected. It's there on the jack. I won't solder it up yet. It's not necessary. But I've got to finish grounding this and run a temporary ground from this pot here's body out to the bridge itself. So I will be using a temporary bridge I've got over here and a wire attached to simulate the bridge on the guitar. And hopefully once this is all together and done, I'll have nothing but clean airspace, so to speak. Maybe a little bit of a hum because it's outside the body, but the pickups, when I tap on them and split them, they'll work perfectly. Okay, so what I've done with the help of a heat sink tool, which you see right here, is hold down that ground wire from the ground lug on the three-way switch. It's going to go to the back of this volume pot per their diagram. And that's something I missed on the first go around, I guarantee you. I missed that. I have to check it, but I think it's a little bit different than what I usually do. On most of these setups, like a Les Paul setup, which is what this is. Just a push-pull difference to it. Again, I got to create a space device or product or plastic or something go in between these two so I can narrow down the space. And I think I'll do the same thing here as well. I've got plenty of plastic parts to use to hold these off from one another. Main thing is to keep them permanent within the cavity itself, and what to attach to and how to do that. Whether I glue it down to the body and then slide them, on each side of it, or what, I have to figure out once I get that cavity opened up. But you can see my little purple line here. Let's get a little better look at that. It's what I need to be within, and I'm just a little bit on the outside of it, which doesn't help much. But once I pull those in together, they should be inside the part itself. Maybe the only exception. Oh man, it's going to be close. But that's why I have to work with, because it's so much, they're so tight in that cavity. So let's zoom back in on the part that we're doing right now. I'm going to solder it up real quick, and the one beside it, using the help of a heat sink tool to hold it down in position. Of course, these can be used for more than just heat sink. They can use, hold your part in place while you solder it. That solder just like to adhere once somewhere. Come on, baby. I want you on both sides if you're going to do it. I'm going to cover that tip up. I want to put a whole blob of stuff on there. That's about right. That's what I want. Now, let that cool down. Then I'll take the heat sink tool off of there. And it should be cool enough to do that to it now. And I'll check that part and make sure it's on there well. It's on there very well. And let me check real quick. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the last of the soldering to the back I'll have to do on these parts. So what I'll do is once I solder this last one up, I'll remove all that extra flux off there. You don't want to leave that stuff laying around on the part. That's nasty. That's just nasty work. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that one. Show you what we're doing there. Again, we're holding it down with the help of a heat sink tool and balancing it against another wire. Which, if that's what you gotta do, that's what you gotta do. Make sure I get this thing on there the first time. And you see the solder wants to spread along with the spread of the flux. And I just want to make sure I get that tip covered as well. And have that here just like that. Of course, you don't have a blob of solder there, but you've got a good line of solder that should hold that part in place once I remove this heat sink tool or device. Yep, it's on there now. So now, the thing to do is let it all cool down, don't get in a hurry, and come in with a paper towel and just wipe all that extra flux off there before you put it inside the guitar and create a nasty mess. Got left to do, guys. It looks like from the diagram, everything's wired up except for the pickups. and I will not do those hardwired outside the body. I gotta wait to do that inside the body. But for test purposes, I still have a ground to run. All right, let's back up and show you that. In order to test this, I gotta attach this bridge to this part right here, the back of it. I may do the temporary, I'm not sure how I'll do that, but I may just loop it in there to touch. As long as it's touching and not touching anything else on this table, I'll be okay. And I'll take a lot of this length off this thing, it's not necessary, but I'll loop it in there somewhere where it's touching the side of this pot where it belongs in real life. Get all this stuff out of the way. And I'll go back and check all these connections to the three-way and to the jack. Make sure none of those are touching one another, because those are temporary too. I will be cutting a lot of this off to fit that jack right in the middle of this, which is the only place I can put it, in the original hole basically. But that's what I got to work with. Okay, well, I went ahead and soldered the tip of this little contraption here I've got for the bridge to emulate or copy the bridge or simulate the bridge, and I did that simply because it's going to be easier to work with. I'm not worried about wires fraying all over the place and straying where they don't belong, but I don't need anything that's long to be intrusive and get in there and get in the way. Also, I'm being very careful when I cut these wires to make sure that none of them, especially the single strands, end up in the wrong spot, like touching a part or internally in a part. That's just a nightmare waiting to happen. So you got to be very careful with your cut wires, especially if they're so tiny. Now I've got to find a spot on this pot that's going to allow me to get in there and touch the side of it. That's all I got to do is touch it. And that's easier said than done, darn it. I don't want to solder this for sure. I gotta find something I put in here to use to hold it in place. I may have to tape it if this doesn't work. That's touching. Okay, so now I got a ground wire to the bridge, or simulating it to the bridge. So that now is grounded. So what I'm trying to do really is eliminate that hum we got the first time we started doing this project. So we had the wrong wiring diagrams to it basically. And I was trying to guess at what went where after doing this so many times. Well, unfortunately, you can actually have like over 900 ways to wire this up, and only one way works. The rest of them don't work. And I know for sure that either I forgot or I'm not used to wiring each individual ground wires to the back of these volume pots from the three-way. I'm usually used to it actually being a split there and going to the jack only. Now, what else can I solder up? Well, I got the soldering iron on. I can rewire this jack, get this unfrayed, basically. This should do the job. Okay, does that do it? Mainly I'm going to cover that hole up and tighten this all up together like that. So that's going nowhere. Now for the other part on its side. And you see they're moving, so that means I've got it on the hole area. There, now it's all captured. Let's let that cool down so I don't break it free. All right, can you see what I'm doing here? No, you can't. Which I was doing, which I'm sorry for, I missed it, but I was filling in the holes of this to make sure that these wires don't go anywhere and don't have any cross contact with parts I don't want them to contact. Nothing frayed. So now what I want to do is pay close attention to these little monsters here that do want to touch each other. See how they all wander, you know? Back here is the ground, that doesn't matter. But up here, this is the splitter for which pickup's playing when. And you do not want these wires touching one another. And the biggest culprit is this big black one here. Alright? It just wants to bend over and touch all the others. So I don't want to do this permanently on this jack, on this switch, because it's the only one I've got right now that will fit the bill. And now I'm going to tin this so that it'll stay in position, no stray wires go anywhere. But I will not be soldering this into the part as of yet. That's not necessary, and I need to trim it anyway once I get in position. And this part that I'm soldering to is going to be sticking up anyway, so I can get to it. So I need to do the same job on each of these, trim these wires way down. And this one's just frayed all over the place. This red one I'm working with right now. Got a lot of frayed edges poking out. That will cause a problem real quickly. And since I'm going to trim this anyway, I'm going to cut this so I don't have to pull against the part any more than I have to. And like I said, grab the parts coming off with my fingers and hold that in place so the spray wires go nowhere. I think I saw a piece of wire fall off of this. No, maybe not. I'm going to trim this a little bit more. Again, holding on to the wire. I'm going to tin this thing up. Very thin because it's a thick piece of wire. Just about like that. Just a little bit, just to hold them in place. Think I got on there enough? Yeah, there we go. I'm sorry you can't see us too well, guys. All I'm doing is just tinning up this one wire so that when I bend it, it'll hold in place but not have any extra wires out to contact any other part. And originally I had these on here just to do a dry fitting and test the circuit. Well, you heard how bad that went. Nothing but a loud, steady hum, meaning I had not wired it properly or grounded it properly. And that has to be the fact that I did not ground this ground lug on the three-way to each of the volume pots as it shows in the diagram that I should have done. The new diagram. Okay, so trim that one more time. And I'm going to hit this with some solder. Just tin it, tin it, tin it, tin it. So that when I bend it, it'll hold in position. Not want to wander. And those wires will stray off of it. Just like that. So in essence, it becomes one solid piece. Of course, it can, you can't pull them apart. Give enough pressure and twist it enough, they will come loose. But that's a lot to do that. It takes a lot to do that. Not naturally, will not happen. So now it's the job of getting these back into the three-way where they belong. Verifying that they go in the right spots. Let's see, this is the bottom pickup, so it'll be right here on this lug. Just turn it like a J-hook. Make sure I've got this thing away from the other pot part, or the jack parts. Of course, it's still going to want to wander until I solder it. This one from the jack goes in the center, which is the hardest one to get in there with the unsoldered wire. Okay, come on baby, just bend for me. And it doesn't want to bend. There we go. Of course, that's part of it being tinned. It doesn't want to bend easily. But I just need to contact it. Sit just like that. And this one needs to come in here and do this very same thing. Just contact it. Alright, so when I flip it back and forth to test each pickup, it works. And like I said, on the back side, those ones all together, well, they're grounding parts. There's no big deal. It's a ground lug for grounding to parts. That's about all she wrote on that issue. Now, each of these wires goes to the top pickup and to the bottom pickup. Actually to the volume pots, but that's what controls them, the pickups. Got ground wires running to alright, now we got each of these lead wires off the three-way going to the controls on the volume pots, controls which pickup's playing, or both pickups playing. We got ground wires coming to each of the pots from the ground lug on the back of the three-way. And what needs to happen next is I need to clean up my mess. And man, is it a mess. I've got flux all over the back of these things. It's got to come off. So we're at a point now, it's time to wire up the pickups, put those into position, a dry fitting on those. I still have those heat shrink sleeves out for purposes unknown as yet. I've got my flux out, which I don't need anymore unless I have a problem with the wire, because I will not be fluxing. I will not be fluxing the wires to the pickups. That's not necessary. Well, I'll take that back. Yes, I need the ground though, so I better just leave the flux out just in case, but I don't think I'll need it anyway. But just, what the heck, leave it out. And I got my micro little shredders here, right? My little strippers. And I am so glad that I found these on StewMac, because the wires are so thin on these guitars. This goes down to 0.25 on the diameter. I've got some that are a little smaller than that, but not much smaller. And actually go to 0 if you're not too careful and just cut right through it. But this is great. These are great. I can't think of anything better. Especially working those darn little wires for the pickups, because those are so thin. Right? Normal strippers don't work on them. I'll show you these. And what I used to have to do to get the plastic off was take a X-Acto knife and use my thumbnail and cut against my thumbnail and the wire itself to get the plastic off. Not a good thing. Okay, it didn't work very well, and I've shortened up plenty of guitar leads because of it. Okay, well, they're working now. Really well too. That was on 1. Let's turn it up a little bit. Right, that's on 2. Now the hum that you hear is because these aren't wired up yet. They're just touching the pots on the ground sections. So I have to wire these in once the parts are in place and the wires go through the body of the guitar. Of course, that'd be an issue if I had to put these pickups through the holes, right? It wouldn't work. But we got it all working nice and happy. Yay! Of course, you'll hum while I do this because they're going to come loose. Alright, so now they're on single. Right, that bottom part. And it's humming against them. This wire's moving if you see it. So there we go. It's all working. Nice and smooth and easy, finally. Now I want to thank Seymour Duncan. They actually, looks like they did a new drawing for me and sent it to me about the wiring up of these pots. And these, believe it or not, are so much smaller than the ones I was going to put in there. And I am really pushed for space on this thing, so I'm very happy they did that so I could put these in there. And I'll find a use for the other one some other time with your guitar. It wants to do a push-pull. Anyway, all this is done now, except to basically finish up the work on the guitar body. That glue up and fitting for those parts to go in there. Okie dokie. And that's going to take a little bit of work to make sure I can press these, not only this way, but this way, to make sure they fit inside, because they're not tiny and that hole is. Okie doke. So hang in there, guys.